My name is Meklit Hadero, and I'm a singer and musician and a cultural activist. So the way that I think about that is that I'm interested in music and the sort of pure experience of performance and the arts. But I'm also interested in looking at how we can use music to ask questions about where we are in our societies and where we want to be. So about a year and a half ago, I co-founded a project called the Nile Project with a dear friend of mine, Mina Girgis. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I was born in Ethiopia, grew up in Brooklyn and in Florida, and I've been in San Francisco for the past 9 years. Mina is an Egyptian ethnomusicologist and musician. And the project started based on a concert. We were both at an Ethiopian music concert in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it was an amazing show, and we danced and danced and danced. And about 2 weeks later, we ran into each other at a conference and got a beer afterwards. And so we were talking over a beer, over an IPA, about the power of music in our respective societies and our respective cultures. I had just been in Ethiopia, spent a month on tour there with a collective of Ethiopian diaspora artists that I founded in 2009 called the Arba Minch Collective. We had toured all around the country, and I had been singing a song there called Abay Mado. I performed last night at the WOW Festival just downstairs and played it. I don't know if anybody was there, but it's a song about the Blue Nile River and a farmer in his life on the Blue Nile River. And the song ended up being a kind of open door into what I call a Nile consciousness, because in diaspora, what you're missing is the ecology. You're not there physically, so it's an environmental connection. You can understand the culture and the music and, you know, the food and all of these things, but in terms of an ecological consciousness, that's something that's a challenge to pick up on. Anyway, this song ended up being an open door into that ecological consciousness. And I was telling Mina about this. Mina was talking about Tahrir Square, and he had just spent the summer protesting in Tahrir Square and talking about the way that music and a kind of chanting was a galvanizing point for people, the way that it allowed the ebb and flow of protest to have that collectivity, and it was everywhere in the Egyptian revolution. So then we started talking about the concert that we had just been at, and why was it that was actually the first time that Mina had heard Ethiopian music. So we're quite close to one another on the continent of Africa, but it was the first time he had ever heard Ethiopian music. And we started talking about this other thing about diaspora, the way that in London or San Francisco or New York, we can hear each other's music. We can hear each other's music. We can learn about each other's cultures because everybody's there. It has to do with immigration. But on the continent, actually, it's quite challenging to learn about each other's cultures. There's a block of information. The flow of culture is challenging. But we actually share a lot. And we began to talk about something else that we share between Egypt and Ethiopia, and actually between many other countries, which is the Nile. Can I have the slide, please? This is the Nile Basin. So we think of the Nile often as an Egyptian river, and that has to do with the historical reality, which is of the ancient Egyptian civilization. But the Nile is actually a river that touches 11 countries in East Africa. So it's actually almost the whole East African part of the continent. It goes as far south as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Rwanda, Burundi. The source of the White Nile is Lake Victoria, which is bordered by Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. The Blue Nile begins in Ethiopia, in Lake Tana. The watershed extends to Eritrea, South Sudan, Sudan, and Egypt. So this is 11 countries in East Africa. We began to talk about the fact that we share this river. We share so much, actually. We share an ecology, a fundamental ecological unit that unites the eastern part of the continent. Yet we don't know each other. And how is that? And so the Nile Project was born from that conversation of let's bring the music, the culture of the neighborhood to the neighbors. So it's been a year and a half now, and we just had our kickoff residency in Aswan in southern Egypt. So the Nile Project is an initiative that brings together musicians from all 11 Nile Basin countries to create music together, to tour down the river and source lakes, and tour the world. And it's also about an educational platform. How can we learn more about each other's cultures, about each other's ecology, because the Nile is different in all of these places. And how can we have more access to the people who are creating solutions to the water issues that we share? social entrepreneurs. So it's a platform for communication, for cross-cultural communication, and looking at the way that that communication can impact many other aspects of how we communicate with each other. So the residency was a shining moment. It really was. So when you think about the way that fusion works, because here we are bringing musicians together from quite different cultures, so how is that going to work, and how did it work? Often when it comes to what fusion is, it has to do with one musician from one tradition will kind of hold it down, and then another cultural tradition will solo over it. This is one way a conversation can happen, but it's really a first step. And then, they switch, and it's kind of back and forth, and that's a lot of what we hear in fusion. What we wanted to do was create a common language, a common musical language. So in order to do that, we needed to have an educational component. So in the residency, every morning, one tradition would stand up and give a seminar about their music. What are the scales? What are the melodies? What does the song even mean? Because that's different culture to culture. A song, is not always the 2.5 minute or 3 minute song that we think of or that we hear on the radio. A song can go on for 8 hours. And that can have meaning, and that can carry you through a collective experience. So after this learning, we would co-compose and co-arrange the songs together. But what it really brought me to, and what it really made me think about, was the quality. Like, what was it that made it work? And when I thought about what was it that made it work, what made that collaboration work? Because it can really be quite difficult to communicate with a different musical language. What I realized is that it was really about a quality of listening. And listening in a way that doesn't actually have to do with your ears, but with your being. We had hoped that people would be interested. We had hoped that musicians would be ready to learn from one another, that it would be important for them, for their own musical development, and also important for their continent and for the kind of society that we want to see, the kind of exchange that we want to see. But what really made it work was that deep openness to one another that happens through not just curiosity, but a readiness for a transformational moment. So I started thinking more about this, and I realized that it extends not just to music, but also to our common ways of communicating with one another. So if you think about you and a friend sitting there, and you're having a conversation, and you are and you're ready to share something with them, and you sense that your friend is open, that they're listening, that they're truly listening with their being, doesn't it allow you to share more? Doesn't it allow you to say more? And the same is true musically. When another musician is listening with openness, you play differently, you play with more of yourself, and you allow a kind of collectivity to happen. This is also true of an audience. When an audience listens, when an audience is open, it allows musicians to play with more of themselves, to create the kind of collectivity that we all look to in cultural experiences. So what I just want to leave you with is the fact that you, the audience, if you ever want to, if you're listening to a speaker, if you're listening to a concert, and you want to have the best show that you can possibly have, you actually have the power to change the way a musician plays. You have the power to change the way a speaker speaks by your own openness. It's a kind of participation that has so much meaning and that is instantly palpable, and that is actually the reason that we have cultural experiences. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for that moment of transformation. So, open. Thank you.